night, he came home.
With the season upon us and a brand new entry in this long and celebrated franchise coming out soon, I found it appropriate to go back to one of the single most influential horror films of all time, a film that should be considered the Bible for slashers, and one of the top 10 films that defines me as a moviegoer. That film is John Carpenter's 1978 classic Halloween. In the year 1963, a 6-year-old child named Michael Myers murdered his sister for no apparent reason with a large butcher knife on Halloween night. 15 years later, just as he's about to be transferred to a different facility, Michael escapes from Smith's Grove Mental Institution and heads for his hometown of Haddonfield, Illinois to kill again, with his psychiatrist hot on his tail. And Michael has already set his sights on his next victim, a teenage babysitter by the name of Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Lucky her. While there had been other movies to lay the foundation for the slasher genre, Halloween was the movie that built on it like Bob Vila, and essentially created the genre as we know it today. The film's narrative, and more specifically the character of Michael Myers, were inspired by a school trip John Carpenter had taken to a mental institution where he had an encounter with a young man who looked at him with an expression of what he later described as pure evil. While other movies would try to paint Michael Myers as a supernatural force, the product of a satanic cult, or try to delve into his psyche and humanize him, John Carpenter's original intention with him was much more simple. Michael is an unexplainable force of nature. We don't know why he stalks and kills. He just does. Period. And that's all we need to know. He's not the size of a Mack truck, nor does he need to be one to be terrifying. Seeing his form standing in the shadows, merely waiting for the moment to show that pale mask of his and strike is terrifying enough. We don't need 40 minutes of learning what life was like for him during his 15-year tenure at Smith's Grove, watching his sanity swirl down the drain. A passionate monologue from a psychiatrist is more than enough.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Sweet Virgin Mary, Loomis, have a cigarette and a poop, my man. If I didn't know you, I'd swear up and down you'd think Michael's the Antichrist. Well, in a way he kind of does. And while Loomis is trying to track down Michael, Mr. Myers is off stalking a trio of high school-age babysitters. For writing the babysitter dialogue, Carpenter enlisted his close friend, the late Deborah Hill, to focus on the ladies, while he would focus on Dr. Loomis's monologues. This leads to another classic staple of slasher movies, and one that was not the intention of either John Carpenter or his co-writer-producer Deborah Hill, the virginal survivor. To put it simply, the main girl, Laurie Strode, is focused on her priorities as a babysitter, while her friends Annie and Linda are more focused on having sex. Many slasher films that followed in Halloween's wake mistook this as virginity being a means of defeating a serial killer. The virgin always survives to the end, while sexual promiscuity essentially paints a Tyler Mane-sized bullseye on your ass. In reality, all it is that Annie and Linda are more focused on getting laid to notice the shadowy figure of Michael Myers standing in the same room as them, whereas Laurie is more alert because she has her mind on the task at hand. Halloween isn't a film that goes for excessive body count. The actual kill count for this movie is actually 6, nor does it go miles out of its way to gross you out. Unlike a number of more recent horror directors, Carpenter takes his sweet time in getting to the killing, instead relying on slowly building up tension, building up a sense of dread within the audience. We know Michael's out there. We know something is going to happen, and we're just waiting for it to happen. And when he finally strikes, it has genuine impact. Because of this, despite there being very little on-screen blood, a lot of people mistakenly remember this movie as being more violent than it actually is. While Halloween does have jump scares, It spends its time building up the atmosphere so that by the time the jump scares do surface, they're perfectly warranted. Half of the film's $300,000 budget was spent on Panavision cameras to give the movie a 2:35 aspect ratio, unlike a lot of low-budget movies that are filmed in 1:8:5 to conserve money. The 2:35 ratio gives the movie considerably more scope than you'd expect from an independent horror film. The movie also makes use of what was then a relatively new camera called the Panaglide, which was one of the earliest steady cams on the market. It allowed free camera movement without the restrictive nature of dolly tracks, and became one of Carpenter's regular tools for filmmaking. Despite being set in Illinois in October, the movie was actually filmed in South Pasadena, California. If you look carefully enough, you can find palm trees in the background of certain shots. Because of this, not only did the production crew have trouble getting pumpkins, but they had to make paper leaves and paint them different colors. Perhaps the cheapest thing they paid for was Michael's iconic mask, which was a Captain Kirk mask purchased for just $1. They ripped the eyebrows and sideburns off, spray painted the hair brown, and painted the face fish belly white, turning it into the iconic face of this 40-year-old franchise. Unlike a lot of later slasher movies, the film is filled with a small cast of likable characters instead of unrelatable caricatures, with the late great Donald Pleasance portraying Michael's psychiatrist Dr. Sam Loomis. Every word out of his mouth feels genuine, and we feel his desperation to stop Michael with every passing moment. Despite the fact that he's only in the film for a grand total of 18 minutes, as they only had 5 days out of their 20-day schedule to film with Pleasance, he manages to steal the show every time he's on screen. In the lead role, we have Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, the innocent girl next door, who finds herself in the wrong place at the wrong time when Michael returns to Haddonfield. Unlike the jailbait that Rob Zombie would cast in his 2007 remake, Jamie Lee Curtis portrays her with a genuine big sister quality that says she could easily be your average high school-aged Midwestern babysitter in real life. Nancy Loomis and PJ Soles portray Laurie's friends Annie Brackett and Linda Vanderklok, who also become victims of Michael's stalking, with Annie being the second most likable of the trio, and Linda being, in my eyes, the least likable due to her pervasive use of the word totally and the fact that all she has on her mind is getting laid. Charles Cyphers plays Sheriff Lee Brackett, Andy's father, who spends most of his screen time helping Dr. Loomis try to find Michael. Unlike a lot of authority figures in these types of movies, he actually does command himself like the skeptic sheriff of this small town, simply trying to do his job. And while a number of different actors portrayed Michael Myers over the course of filming, the one that gets the most credit is Nick Castle, a film school friend of Carpenter's. He doesn't have any dialogue in the film, but he doesn't need it. Simply standing in the background with that creepy mask on is all he needs to do, and he does it well. The final verdict on Halloween? Buy that shit.